But have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Look, I've not engaged in that rhetoric.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering.
America.
Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week, and my, oh my, what a difference 24 hours makes in the world of politics. In the last video, we were talking about Joe Biden's address to the nation in light of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump, where he said that we all need to lower the temperature on political rhetoric. In case you missed it, it's going to be in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. You can click that link at any time. And in that video, I was talking about where was the accountability for Joe Biden for his own contributions to raising the temperature on political rhetoric. Well, today, we got that answer. Joe Biden takes zero accountability for raising the temperature, and in fact, he's turning up the front burners again. We're going to talk about this interview he did with Lester Holt, as well as statements made by Karine Jean-Pierre about this issue. But before we do, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you like what you see and hear in this or any other video on the channel, I'm going to ask you guys in the politest, nicest way possible to smash that thumbs up button. Like, comment, share the show with your friends. All that really, really good stuff that helps us feed the YouTube algorithm. Thank you guys so much for all that you do to help grow the show, and welcome to those hundreds and hundreds of new subscribers that came in over the weekend. I'm glad you guys are here, and for all you newbies out there who may be finding us for the first time, I hope this video earns your subscription as we talk about the hypocrisy of Joe Biden and the Biden administration, who want everyone to lower the temperature on their rhetoric, but at the same time takes no accountability for raising the temperature themselves. Speaking of turning down the temperature, can Karine Jean-Pierre please turn down the temperature on that blazer?
It's burning my eyes.
KJP was once again at the podium this week, this time fielding questions in follow-up to Joe Biden's weekend address to the nation about lowering the temperature on political rhetoric. And they want to see how Biden himself will be doing that on the campaign trail.
Just last week in Michigan, President Biden called Trump a threat to this nation. Should we expect that he will not be calling out Trump with that kind of rhetoric going forward?
So what I will say is that it is important, right? We believe it's important to continue to forcefully speak against any type of political violence. That is what the president believes. And we do not want to politicize this moment. Politicizing this moment is unacceptable. We believe, and the president believes, you heard from him, in a very clear statement last night about the importance of uniting this country, the importance of continuing to do so, and that we cannot tear America apart to score political points. We can't.
I want you to remember those first 3 points. She clearly hasn't answered the question, but there's 3 themes there that I want you to remember going forward in this video. The first one is we are all against political violence. The second one is we're not looking to score political points off of what happened. And the third one is Biden wants to unite the nation. She hasn't answered the question about whether or not Biden will continue to use inflammatory rhetoric, such as what he did in Michigan. But hey, this is the job of a White House press secretary, right? To avoid answering questions.
Cannot do that. And so we don't want to politicize this moment. We want to unite. We want to continue to focus on that. And that's what the president's going to focus on right now.
So will his messaging change this week?
His messaging is going to be really clear. He's going to continue to engage with the American people. That's what you're going to see in the next upcoming days, upcoming weeks. Nothing different than what he's done in the last almost 4 years.
That's kind of important right there. Nothing different than what he's been doing over the last 4 years.
Flashback.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans quote a clear and present danger to our democracy.
End of flashback.
That had some pretty inflammatory rhetoric in it. It was certainly raising the temperature of political rhetoric. And Democrats followed suit with a lot of those talking points, as we saw in yesterday's video as well. So Karine Jean-Pierre is basically saying, we're not raising the temperature. We're doing what we always do, which, as you've seen, raises the temperature. Nothing's changing with Biden. The weekend speech was just a bunch of fodder and BS to try to quell things down, tamp things down a little bit, and he's going to go right about his business 24 hours later.
And lay out his agenda, highlight his agenda. There are differences. There are differences in our agenda and what Republicans believe, right? There are differences. And that is okay. And it is okay to speak to someone's record and someone's character. But we cannot accept violence. We cannot accept that. And so the president's going to continue to do that, highlight his agenda. It's important for the American people to hear directly from him what he has done the last 3.5 years and how he sees the future of this country. That will not change.
There's nothing wrong with highlighting differences in agenda. There's nothing wrong with highlighting differences in policy points. There's nothing wrong with highlighting differences in political philosophy. There's also nothing wrong with pointing out differences in character and values that candidates may have. But all those things you can do in a way that doesn't make someone out to be the bad guy from WW2. You can do these things without inflaming the emotions and the passions of people to the point where political violence will break out, as we saw over the weekend. All people are asking for across the nation is bring it down a notch, everyone. Joe Biden seemed to be committed to doing that, but now it seems like he wants everyone else but him to do that. Karine Jean-Pierre clearly wants to move on from this topic, but the press corps is not going to let her.
Great. Taking another stab at the question you've answered several different ways, but I guess more simply, are we going to continue to hear the president in official events or on the campaign trail use the phrase threat to democracy specifically?
This is something we also talked about in yesterday's video. This phrase, threat to democracy, and other variations of it, sometimes using the word existential threat to democracy, meaning that the nation's going to end if Donald Trump wins and he poses that big of a threat to our nation. Will the Biden campaign continue to use that turn of phrase? Let's see. And remember those 3 points we talked about earlier. Denouncing political violence, not looking to score political points, and Joe Biden's a uniter.
I want to be very clear. The president's always going to denounce violence, forcefully denounce it. He's always been against this throughout his career, throughout the last 4 years. We do not want to politicize this. It's unacceptable to do that. That's what the president has said. It is time to bring this country together, to bring American people together. That's what he wants to see.
We have a winner!
All 3 right there, repeated again. Karine Jean-Pierre has a script and she's sticking to it.
And so that's where I'm going to leave it. He wants to unite this country. And that is something that he's been saying since 2019.
It'd be really hard to do, though, if you're trying to make a shift away from what has been the platform of this administration, of his campaign, in that the view is that Trump and the MAGA Republican agenda is a threat to democracy. So how do you get that message across while bringing the temperature down? How is that phrasing going to be replaced? Is it going to be replaced?
Well, look, what I can say is this. We have our differences, and it's okay to have our differences. And it is okay to speak to someone's record, to speak to someone's character. That is the difference of, that is important to be able to do, to show, right, what the American people, what you're all about.
And that's the 4th theme, I guess, that we should have picked up on earlier, but I didn't because I'm a bit of a buffoon myself. That it's okay to talk about differences. That's point number 4. That's on the script for Karine Jean-Pierre. She's not giving an answer to any question about will the rhetoric change from Biden. She's just sticking to those now 4 talking points.
We're just we're just going to continue to denounce violence. It is important to do that, forcefully be against violence. Political violence has no place in America. It should not be. It does not have a place here. The president's going to continue to be very, very forceful about that. But we have a difference of agenda. That is the truth. That is the truth. And we're going to continue to speak to that difference, and the president's going to highlight his agenda.
Does the president view Trump's agenda as a threat to democracy?
Look, what I will say is right now we're not going to politicize what happened on Saturday. What happened on
Here we go again. She's just repeating the same things over and over again without answering the damn question.
This whole thing is a freaking sham!
Yeah, thanks, Green. So then, given the language from the leader of the free world, how does the president or the administration bear any responsibility for the environment that we're in?
Finally, the question I've been asking since yesterday's video: where is the accountability? Where is the contrition from the Biden campaign and from the president for their contributions to this political climate and for raising the temperature such that someone tried to assassinate Donald Trump? Again, the shooter bears the primary responsibility for everything that happened and the attempted assassination. But that didn't happen in a vacuum. Political rhetoric must have played some part in all this. And now we finally getting from the press a question to Joe Biden about whether or not he contributed to this political climate.
What I will say is, and this is just a repetitive of what I'm saying here, we have to lower the temperature. You heard that from the president. There's no place in America for violence. It is important that we are really clear about that. We do not know. We do not have the answers to what happened on Saturday. What we know is a former president was shot. That is not something that should be accepted here, right? That is something that we have to condemn. That's what we know. There are a lot of questions that are still out there. There are a lot of questions that are still out there, but we have to lower the temperature.
But the president from the Oval Office said we have to look. Yeah, the president from the Oval Office said we have to lower the temperature, but he never said it starts with me.
Bingo!
When it comes to political rhetoric out there, when it comes to being mindful of how we are moving forward with our politics here, it takes all of us to lower that temperature.
But it also takes a leader to lead in lowering that rhetoric. Joe Biden is clearly not a leader if he's not saying, I accept my responsibility, my role, my part in ratcheting up the temperature in our political rhetoric. He's not doing that. He's saying everyone needs to do that, but he's not leading by example. This is a flaw of leadership that for many people should be a signal, should be a red flag about where their vote should go.
And I think that's important. That's important to note, right? And I think that's what the American people want to see. They wanted to hear what the president said in the Oval yesterday. They wanted to hear what the president said on Saturday, right? It is important to speak to the moment that we're in and say, we got to condemn this type of violence. We do. Now, there are a lot of open questions here. We don't have answers to those open questions. The independent investigation will be thorough. That's what the president wants to see. We want to get to the bottom of it because there are questions that the American people should know as to what happened, what led to that awful, awful night on Saturday. I have to actually, the president is waiting for me, so I have to actually go.
And there's the hasty exit from Karine Jean-Pierre after not really answering any questions about the accountability of Joe Biden for ratcheting up the heat in the political rhetoric. Clearly, he's not the only one, but again, leaders are supposed to lead, and leaders are supposed to take accountability. The people just didn't want to hear what Joe Biden had to say. They wanted to see him lead through this moment. He's clearly failed, at least up until this point. But when we come back, we're going to look at a later interview that came out with NBC's Lester Holt talking about just this topic. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. So later in the day, NBC News released this interview with Joe Biden in the aftermath of the attempted assassination of President Donald Trump. And Lester Holt is going to put Biden's feet to the fire when it comes to his contributions to increasing the temperature on the political rhetoric lately.
Let's talk about the conversation this has started, and it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
Those are your own words.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing.
Okay, so we already know that Biden's a doddering old fool, feeble mind, feeble body, and all that. So he's saying that this was a poor choice of words. He meant to say focus rather than target or crosshairs or bullseye, which is a term that he ended up using. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. It certainly sounds like he's dancing around the actual words that he used and the responsibility attached to those words, especially in light of what happened a few days after he used those words. So it seems like, again, this is a failing of leadership from Joe Biden trying to weasel his way out of the responsibility for his own rhetoric.
Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that wouldn't accept the outcome of this election.
And now it's turned into a whataboutism. He's trying to take the focus off of himself and his own words and his own responsibility and putting out there, well, what about the other guy and what he's been saying? Clearly, Donald Trump has been criticized and ostracized for most of the things he said over the past 8-9 years or so. I think there's certainly been enough focus on that to have an opinion on those words, and I'll let you have your opinion on all of that, whether or not he was joking when he said dictator, whether or not he should have accepted the election results based upon the facts and circumstances of the last election, and all that stuff that's already out there in the ether. But what the national conversation is at this point, Mr. President, is responsibilities for the words used to ramp up the political rhetoric that resulted in the attempted assassination of a former president. Do you take responsibility or not?
Automatically. You can't only love your country when you win. And so the focus was on what he's saying, and I mean, the idea.
But have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Forget about the people that are not balanced, because honestly, you can't prepare yourself for every contingency out there. People who are not balanced should be getting help that they need, and that's a whole different failing in our country that we need to address as well. But what you can do is prepare your words carefully enough so that a reasonable person won't think that you are trying to infer something more extreme than you actually are. That's been a criticism of Donald Trump and how he is inartful as well, and he certainly is many times. But this is a legitimate question in the sense that, Joe Biden, have you taken a moment to reflect on your role and your responsibility and taken accountability for your words, your deeds, your actions?
Well, I don't think, look, how do you talk about the threat to democracy, which is real, when a president says things like he says?
He's not moving away from that language. He's not going to turn down the temperature himself. He doesn't know any other way to do it but to inflame the passions of people, to be inflammatory in his words and deeds. He doesn't know any other way to do it because he can't find a coherent sentence speaking contemporaneously, as we saw at the debate. He's unable to do anything but follow the script, the same script that Karine Jean-Pierre was using, apparently.
Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I've not engaged in that rhetoric. Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric.
Are you freaking shitting me? You haven't engaged in that rhetoric? We saw that speech. It was one of many by Joe Biden turning up the rhetoric on extreme MAGA Republicans and all that they're going to do to destroy the nation.
Who are you going to believe? Me or your own eyes?
You're not adding to the rhetoric, only Trump is? That, as you say, Mr. President, is a bunch of malarkey.
Talks about there'll be a bloodbath if he loses, talking about how he's going to forgive all the, actually, I guess, suspend the sentences of all those who were arrested and sentenced to go to jail.
Again, the whataboutisms are there. Going back to, well, what about what he did? What about what he's planning to do? Am I just supposed to lay back and let him say that?
What am I supposed to do?
You're supposed to point out the flaws in those policies and plans and those statements. You're not supposed to contribute more to the temperature of the rhetoric going up, Mr. President. So when you say that there's no other way to handle it, what am I supposed to do? People have been handling this sort of rhetoric in our nation for over 200 years. They got by without trying to say that people are going to end the nation. Maybe you can too. So as you can see, don't expect these flames to go away anytime soon. Nothing's changing from Team Biden going forward, despite what happened over the weekend with the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Joe Biden takes zero accountability for what happened. He didn't contribute anything to this political climate. His rhetoric has been just fine. What am I supposed to do when dealing with someone who is a threat to democracy? Do you really believe that Donald Trump's a threat to democracy, especially when he was running the nation for 4 years and we had no wars, we had a bustling economy? Come on. That sort of inflamed rhetoric really has no place anymore after we see what years and years and years of that have gotten us, as I discussed in yesterday's video. Nothing's going to change on the campaign trail, but you're supposed to change. You're supposed to lower your rhetoric. You're supposed to not inflame the passions of people when talking about politics, especially when it comes to talking about Joe Biden, because what about the other guy, as Biden pointed out time and time again in that interview, deflecting from responsibility for his own actions? Again, this is all a failure of Biden's leadership. That's the bottom line here. He refuses to lead by example. He wants all of you to do something that he's unwilling to do. That makes him a very significant and intolerable hypocrite. And if that inflames the passions of people and ups the political rhetoric too much for you, then maybe politics isn't for you. But listen, that's just my opinion on all of this. I want to know what you guys think about this failing of leadership, as I'm terming it, about Joe Biden. Is he right? Did he not increase the volume? Did he not turn up the heat on political rhetoric? Let's talk about that in the comments. And as always, like and share the video with your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. I'll see you guys in the comments talking about this issue, as well as all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.